Okay, so now that we sort of understand what it is that money does and why it's valuable to have money in society, let's start sort of thinking about what can and cannot be used as money. So obviously, dollar bills, $5 bills, and $20 bills, these make great money. But other things like, maybe my Starbucks cap, right? Would this make good money? Why or why not? It is kind of gross. It's got some stuff on it, right? So maybe my Starbucks cap, not exactly a good idea. But what is it that makes dollar bills good at being money, but Starbucks caps not? And so there are 5 criteria for good money. We'll put good in quotes here. The first one is that it must be acceptable by most people. Okay, so people have to generally accept that whatever it is that we're using as money is valuable and it's useful as money. So my pen, probably not going to be accepted by most people as money. Okay, my pencil, right? Since I have a pencil, I am an economist. I always have a pencil nearby. This golf ball, I don't know where I got this from, but this, right? Probably not going to be good money, okay? Because it won't be acceptable. The second criteria is that it should be of standard quality so that any 2 units are essentially identical, right? So you shouldn't be able to tell any 2 units of it apart. So let me pull out another dollar bill here. All right, if you look at these two, they're basically the same thing. The only real difference is in the serial numbers and this number here, which I don't know what the 12 and the 6 means, but who knows, right? These are essentially identical. There's no difference between these 2 bills almost whatsoever. There's a few superficial differences, but for the most part, they're essentially identical. Okay. The third is that it should be durable so that its value is not lost to spoilage. Right? We want to have something that lasts for a very long time. So dollar bills last a lot longer than food, right? So food is terribly non-durable. Dollar bills are very durable. Dollar coins are more durable, which is why we tried to mint, or we successfully minted, dollar coins a few years ago. But unfortunately, they weren't acceptable by most people, and so you don't see them in circulation hardly at all. The fourth criteria, is that it should be valuable relative to its weight or size. Okay, so it's no use carrying around, a bunch of Ferris golf ball foam plush things, right? Because this thing is not going to be very valuable relative to its weight or its size, right? It weighs significantly more than a dollar bill, right? It weighs a lot more than a $20 bill, that's for sure, right? So this $20 bill, very light, very valuable. This thing, not very valuable, and not relatively light compared to this. And so Ferris, as great as it is, these golf balls would not make very good money. Okay, and then finally, it should be divisible so that you can use it for small transactions. Right? This is just saying that you need to be able to make change. Okay, so imagine if the only bill that existed was a $20 bill. There's no fives, there's no tens, there's no ones, there's no coins, right? And there's only $20 bills. Would you guys ever buy a pack of bubble gum if the smallest bill you could give was a $20 bill for that, right? My guess is no. Now, would you buy $20 worth of gum at once, right? Which is a lot of gum. I don't think you would do that either. Okay, so the reason why dollars work very well is because we can break them down into smaller denominations, right? And we can use these smaller bills to buy small purchases like bubble gum. Okay, and so in order to be good money, it has to satisfy all 5 of these criteria. So what about gold? Does gold satisfy all of these criteria? Right? As it turns out, yeah, pretty well. It's definitely acceptable by most people, or at least it used to be. Right? Gold is very standard quality. It should be durable, so gold doesn't spoil. It's very valuable relative to its weight, and you can divide gold into smaller pieces of gold. My pen, right, is not acceptable. It is of standard quality, so I imagine I have other pens. I have a blue one. I have another blue one. Right, so I have multiple standard quality of pens, right, which are all basically the same thing. Right, I even have a red one, right, which doesn't get used too much, as you can tell. So you can see, like, I have standard quality pens, right, and these are all roughly the same. So maybe we could use my pens as money. Right, and it's certainly durable, right? So my pens are durable, but they're not exactly valuable relative to their weight, and I can't really divide them. It's also probably not acceptable, right? So my pens would not work as money because they fail to meet at least 3 of these criteria. Okay, but dollar bills, all kinds of things meet these. An interesting question is, does Bitcoin meet all 5 of these criteria? And if you think about it, it definitely meets these 4. The one it doesn't meet right now is being acceptable by most people. So it turns out most people still don't want to use Bitcoin, but who knows, maybe someday this will change. Okay. So now that we sort of understand what money does and what makes good money, let's get into sort of how we measure money. So how do we measure? Okay. So how do we measure how much money there is? And I'm not going to show you my credit cards because I don't want anyone to steal it. But how do we determine what counts as money? So, like, obviously, you know, this counts as money. This is very clearly money. Like, this counts as money. No real questions here. But what about, like, my credit card? Or what about my student loans, right? Or your student loans, right? Or what about my savings account? Does that count as money? Right? So there's all kinds of different types of money out there. But sometimes, but do they all always count as money? And so it turns out there are 3 main measures of the amount of money. So there are 3 ways that we measure money, or how much money there is. Okay, the first one is called M1. This is very basic. It's basically currency plus your savings account, or your checking account. Okay, plus checking account. Okay, so this counts all the dollar bills that you have, all the monies, and it counts, your checking account, and that's it, nothing else, right? So M1 is the amount of currency that there is, so all the bills, all the coins, etc., plus your checking account. Okay. M2 is more broad. Okay. This counts everything in M1 plus your savings account plus CDs, your certificates of deposit, plus what are known as money market fund shares. Okay, so M2 is just a broader definition of what counts as money. And then there's a third one, which isn't counted nearly as much as it used to be, but it's not tracked anymore. But it's still, I think, a pretty important one, especially in today's economy. And what M3 is it's M2 plus loans, which includes credit cards. Okay, and so what this is let's do this. There. M1 is defined as, or all these things, we'll use proper notation. Okay, so M3 is the broadest definition there is, and it's basically counting all your currency, your checking account, your savings account, your CDs, your money market fund shares, and your credit cards, right? And the reason why we would want to count different or we use different measures of money is really depending on what it is that we want to talk about. If we want to talk about the total number of dollars that there are in an economy, we want to use M1, okay? Because then we're just talking again about how many of these pieces of paper are there, right? That's a question that we could ask. But if we want to talk about how many dollars could actually be spent right now, we'd want to use M3 because I can use my credit card to spend money, right? I can use that. Even though my credit card, if you think about it, is nothing more than a very short-term loan, right? Whenever you swipe your credit card, you end up getting a bill at the end of the month that you have to pay. And so what you basically are doing is taking out a very small, very short-term loan and paying it back at a later date. And so you're borrowing future money every time you swipe your credit card, and then you pay back that money at some point in the future, right? At the end of the month, hopefully, right? And so what we have is essentially a situation where M3 is kind of like counting the steel and the car from our discussion of GDP, but it's not as inaccurate as that is, right? M3, it's true that we're counting money that we will have in the future and that we're going to spend now, but it could be a useful thing if we want to think about how much spending could conceivably happen right now. So M3 isn't really used too much, but we do sometimes use it.